everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. I hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday, as fantastic as it could be. We are going to start in just a few minutes. Meanwhile, let's do a quick exercise to check if you can hear and see us well. Just find a chat and drop us a line. Say hi, say where you're joining us from, how is your day so far, anything you would like to tell us. Okay, seems like we are all set. No issues with the sound. We can start. And the topic of our today's webinar is site migrations with AI, improving speed and accuracy of migrations with AI. But first, let me quickly introduce people who are hosting the event for you today. Me, Helena Kuzmovich, I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager at SE Ranking, making sure that we deliver the best product experience for you and covering all your SEO and marketing needs. And here with me today is Mark Williams Cook, Director at Candor, founder of also Ask.com, and an experienced industry professional with more than 20 years of SEO experience in the industry. Mark, we're happy to have you here. Could you please tell a few words about yourself, because you know more about yourself than I do?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for having me. Firstly, really excited to be here. Hi to everyone in chat. So as you kindly said, my name's Mark, and I'm director at Candor, which is a digital agency, and founder of Also Asked, which hopefully some of you have heard of. It's a keyword research tool. If you do know me already, it's probably because of the unsolicited SEO tips I put on LinkedIn. I've been doing so for about the last 5 years. I've posted about 900 now on LinkedIn. I also run the coreupdates.com newsletter. So every week I send out those tips, some updates around SEO. And I've also got an SEO course, and we've taught over 8,000 people over the last couple of years SEO.
Thank you. That is fantastic experience. And we are very much looking forward to see your presentation today, because I know that it's going to be awesome. But first of all, I will quickly remind those people who do not know much about SEO Ranking that we are an SEO toolkit for agency and in-house professionals. We are very proud to be worldwide recognized and get high ratings from our users who are in-house professionals and SEOs and marketing teams. We offer specialized tools for literally every SEO task. First of all, we provide you with a complete SEO toolkit with more than 30 tools covering almost anything you could imagine, any SEO task you can think of, from competitive research to content creation, backlink analysis, and more. We also know how accurate data is important for you. That's why we rely on AI-powered algorithms and make sure you get all the precise ranking data and insights to make your decisions efficient. And of course, we always work to make sure your collaborative features are efficient, and you receive automated reporting, project management, and the ability to manage access on every level, so you can work efficiently with all your team members. SE Ranking is trusted by more than 40,000 businesses worldwide. So joining SE Ranking, you're in good company. If you're not one of these businesses, we are waiting for you. And now I think we are all set to start. Mark, if you're ready, the stage is yours. Site migrations with AI, please.
Thank you so much. And hi again to everyone in chat. Feel free, we're going to have at the end of this presentation, we'll do some Q&A. So I'll try and keep track of your questions if you type them as we go. I'm going to attempt to do like a full screen share. So rather than just give you slides on how to do things, because I want to invite disaster, I'm going to try and do some of this live, because some of the scripts we use previously, I think some people have found them a bit scary. So I thought it'd be good if I can actually show you them being used, to show you actually it's not that difficult. So if anyone here has done a site migration, you'll probably know they can be quite stressful. I've done probably over 100 site migrations, or been involved with over 100 site migrations from small sites to very, very big sites. And in my experience, there's a few things that make migrations particularly stressful. They're normally done at a time when resource is limited. So a migration will typically happen when a site's being redesigned or you're moving CMS. So generally there'll be a lot of people involved who are all stacked with work. So the amount of resource you have to get the migration done can be limited. It's particularly challenging as well because not always you're in a situation where stakeholders understand the value of what you're trying to achieve with site migration. On top of that, there's usually a strict deadline for when everything needs to be done by. So sometimes without consulting SEOs, you'll just have a site launch date. Obviously, everything needs to be done before that, including all of the migration planning, implementation, testing, execution as well. And to pile the pressure on you as an SEO, the cost of doing things wrong in a site migration can be very high. I don't know if any of you have seen before, there's been quite a few quite public cases. The latest one I saw was the Games Workshop Warhammer site that was migrated and lost like 50-60% of its traffic. And again, that's something that's sometimes lost in translation when you're involved in a site migration, communicating to stakeholders that things that maybe don't seem that important or aren't immediately apparent when you just look at the website could have big implications when you actually come to migrating the site. So this is one of the reasons I picked this topic to talk about, because if you speed up certain areas of site migration, you get to spend more time on other parts that sometimes you'd otherwise be limited on. The other thing I want to mention before we begin is there's many different types of migration. So I'm defining migration essentially as when you move one thing to another and that thing can have a material impact on SEO. So the most obvious one is URLs. If you are migrating from one set of URLs to another, I think everyone's probably familiar with that. That's something that can impact your SEO performance. A domain migration is actually separate to this because it's quite possible to keep the same website, keep the same URL structure, but simply change the domain. So changing URLs is slightly different in terms of impact and process to actually changing the domain. There's other things to consider there. Like if you change the domain, you might consider whether it's a country code top level domain or a generic one, for instance, might have a big impact on what you're doing. The other thing you can change and consider a migration is if you change content management system. So even if you kept the domain the same and you managed with a different CMS somehow to keep all the URLs the same, other things can be impacted, such as performance, especially on kind of serverless SaaS platforms. So if you move from like your own hosted WooCommerce to like Shopify, there's a whole bunch of stuff around like hosting that's out of your control. So you'll go onto kind of Cloudflare, and there might be performance differences that, again, can impact rankings. And finally, design migration is a thing. So if you keep all of the same URLs, if you keep the same domain, if you keep the same content management system, but you visually redesigned all of your pages, this could actually impact your SEO. A particular point that really hammered this home to me was I listened to Gary Ish from Google on their podcast Search Off the Record, and they were talking about the modified version they use of PageRank now, which follows what's called a reasonable surfer instead of a random surfer model, which is essentially giving more PageRank to links that they believe would be more likely to be clicked. So this would mean if links were bigger in your new design or smaller in your new design than they previously were, it could potentially affect how much PageRank would go to the subsequent pages and therefore how they would rank. So big links at the top of the page are more likely to be clicked than tiny little links, say, down near the footer. So all of these things are types of migration. And I want to just hone in that today what we're talking about is URL migration. I'm going to caveat a few things as we go along because I want to make it clear I'm giving some guidance to speed up one specific part of a type of migration. This isn't like a how to fully do a site migration, because that would take a lot longer than the time that we have. Lastly, even with one area, one type of migration, there are actually lots of stages. I won't go through them all, but off the top of my head, this was my list: doing risk assessments, timing, when you actually do the migration, like if you've got peak and off-peak seasons, auditing the new site, performance measurements, internal linking, changing backlinks, managing your existing redirects, non-internal URL migrations. So that's URLs that might be indexed that aren't linked internally that you need to consider, how you benchmark, how you monitor, how you end up implementing your redirect logic, especially if you've got lots of redirects, how you test, over what period you test. All of these things are part of a migration. And I think, again, with stakeholder communication, a migration is sometimes just seen as, well, we need to redirect the URLs, right? Yeah, that's like the main part of a migration. But actually, especially with bigger sites, there's a lot more involved. I mean, the risk assessment there that I've got first is something we do for most clients where they have a big site. Before we look at a migration, we consider things like how much traffic and what is it worth is going to dictate how much effort we put into the migration. So if you've got a website that is 50 pages and you get 10 visitors a month, very obviously it's not worth spending weeks and weeks or hundreds of hours working on a migration plan and spending thousands and thousands on it, because the value of your traffic is probably way lower. So, you'd spend more on a migration than if your website went to zero. Whereas if you're working on a e-commerce website that does £1 million a month revenue, then even things that might impact your traffic by 5%, that's a £50,000 per month consideration. And then that cascades to actually what you need to think about in terms of the planning and how much detail you need to go into. So there are many, many stages to a migration. And today, specifically, we are talking about URL mapping, which is one part of one type of migration. And to be really specific, if you haven't done a site migration before, or this is all new to you, URL mapping is the process of taking all of the URLs of your current website and matching them with an appropriate URL on the new website or the new set of URLs. So essentially, if someone typed in or had bookmarked or clicks a link to a page on your old site, where should they end up on the new site? I point out as well, we're going to have all these slides available for everyone because there's some links in them, so you don't need to worry too much about taking notes. So this is the output that we are looking to achieve, which is essentially having a list of URLs, which are your from URLs. So this might be your current site, to where they're going to go on the new site. This is what we're going to achieve today in a very fast method using AI. So I want to go over the pros and cons of this approach as well. So URL mapping with AI, the most obvious benefit is the speed, because URL mapping generally is like the 80% of the job in terms of time taken if you have a large website. So if you've got this website with 10, 50,000, 100,000 URLs, it's not unusual when people do this manually for multiple people to spend days doing this. And one of the reasons it can take a while is sometimes you're having to load pages on the new staging website and your old website and match them up, especially if you can't see what's going on with the URLs. So speed is one of the biggest advantages of doing this. The scalability as well, meaning that this same method will work on a website with 100 pages or with 1 million pages. So this is a really nice methodology. So previously, again, when you were doing things manually, you would tend to have a different methodology for sites with 100,000 pages, because you can't manually do them all because it would take weeks and weeks or months, even with a large team. So you tend to maybe write some code to do a certain type of URL and then review that manually and have some teams working on important URLs. This process just works whatever the size. And finally is the actual efficiency of doing it this way, in that this task then can primarily just be owned by one person. It doesn't have to be a coordinated thing between several people and someone coordinating those people. Lastly, as well, actually, I would argue that it's a double-edged sword, but the accuracy that you can produce with AI is better than human only. And there are some potential downsides. Over-reliance is the first one. The output does still need validating by a human. In my experience, when you give people really cool tools to do jobs quickly, once they start trusting them, they get lazy and things get missed. And if you remember, one of the main points about the whole site migration and the problem and the difficulty and the stress of site migrations is that small problems or small errors can cause big problems. So it's still really important that a human looks over what's done and sense checks it. Training is a potential downside in that this process for most people, maybe for people on this webinar, will be new. So it will require some training, some practice. You can't necessarily expect people to do things well the first time they ever do them. And lastly, it's kind of a counterpoint to the better accuracy, but there is some output variance. And what I mean by this is the output that we'll get from the AI and the script that I'm going to show you is deterministic, which means if you give it the same input 10 times, you will get the same output 10 times. However, it does require you to select the right parameters to get good results. On certain combinations of sites, I've had it where it doesn't work as well as I'd hoped. But in 95% of cases where I've used this so far, I've managed to get very, very useful results from it. So I think it's definitely worth a try. But again, I would always have a plan B for if, for whatever reason, this isn't working for you. Now, before we move on, I want to be really clear about this, which is that when we're talking about using AI to speed up site migrations, I'm not talking about ChatGPT. The two terms AI and ChatGPT, and in general, I'd say AI based on large language models, LLMs, have become interchangeable, but they're not. So AI, is a term that's been around since like the 1950s. It encompasses all sorts of things. ChatGPT is kind of used for lots of stuff now. I wouldn't recommend using ChatGPT for anything to do with URL mapping or redirects at this scale. And the reason is that how ChatGPT and similar models work, being based on large language models, is they are just outputting like the next most likely characters, the next most likely words, which is why they produce things that read very well. The generative part of these models is the spicy bit that adds new things, which is why you get what are referred to as hallucinations, which is essentially when these models go off piste a little bit, go off the beaten track and just kind of make something up. And that's not what you want when you're doing site migrations. It can, if you used a generative AI model to do a task like this, there is a non-zero chance, and a lot more than non-zero when you get more and more URLs, that it will introduce some small errors because it's just going to make some things up. And those errors tend to be, because of their very nature, quite subtle, because they'll be close but not correct. And when it comes to site migrations, generally there is it's either correct or it's not. So I would just say we're not using ChatGPT. I'll show you the script we've got in a minute, and I wouldn't use ChatGPT for a similar task. The tools we will need is Screaming Frog Spider, which probably most of you have heard of. I hope so. I'd say it's probably one of the most commonly used tools in the SEO toolbox. It's a website crawler, for those that don't know, which we're going to use to collect all of the URLs on our current site and the site we're going to be migrating to. And it also collects associated metadata about those URLs, such as the on-page content, the titles, header tags, meta descriptions that we need for matching. The paid version of Screaming Frog is £200. I mean, if you're doing a site migration and the value of what you're doing is less than £200, you probably shouldn't be spending any time really on migration, or very, very little. So it is generally worth the money, even if you're only going to use it once for site migration, but it will be a tool I imagine you'll get a lot of use out of. I'm not affiliated with them. It's just you do need this tool to use this process. The next tool we're going to use in conjunction with that is Google Colab, which, good news, is free. It's essentially a cloud service that allows you to write and execute code in your web browser. The advantages are you don't have to install Python on your local machine, don't have to install packages, worry about versioning, anything like that. You can produce scripts, you can share them online, and I'll share you the script we're going to use in a moment. And essentially, Google Colab's what we're going to use to upload all of this data and do the matching. And lastly, we will be using Excel or Google Sheets, LibreOffice, any software you like to manipulate CSV files. So this is going to be the data that we get out the end. There's 3 steps to this process. So the first is to crawl a website to get the data we want. I'll show you how to do that in these slides. And then I will do a screen share. I'm on one monitor at the moment, so this is going to be nice and challenging for us to do for you. But I will show you how to actually run the script. I'll do it in real time with you to show you it's actually quite simple, and then show you some of the output that we get as well. So I'll whiz through these on slides. This kind of section's fairly straightforward. So the first thing you need to do is crawl your live site with Screaming Frog. If you've never used it before, it's as simple as putting your URL in and kind of hitting go. With Screaming Frog, you've got the option to do a standard HTML crawl or a crawl that executes JavaScript. It really depends on what your site requires to see your URLs. To play it safe, you could run a JavaScript crawl. I know in my case, in this example, I can just do a standard HTML crawl, which is quite a lot quicker. So I'm actually going to do a test we've got a testing site for our With Canada site that's being built. And this is a crawl of the live site that I've done. And once that crawl is complete, we want to, in this case, we're just going to, in this example, be redirecting our actual kind of HTML pages. So there's a filter up here for HTML. This will say all by default. So you click this and select HTML. So this will just show you kind of the HTML rendered pages. So it's not going to show you things like images. We then need to filter this list so it only contains web pages that give us a status code of 200. So a 200 status code just means kind of, okay, the page exists. We don't want to deal with any pages or URLs rather that return something like a redirect, because this script is going to be using metadata associated with the page, like page title, as I said, or the content on the page. If it's a 301, for instance, it's not going to have that. So we just want to filter. There's a couple of different ways you can do this, but an easy way is just to click on this little filter icon here, and you can just say status code contains 200, and this will then give you a list of just your HTML URLs that exist and are returning 200. And you click export, and you want to save this as origin.csv. So this is going to be our origin URLs that we are going to do our redirects from. Again, remember, this isn't a full migration. As I said, we're not covering images at the moment in this example. You probably have things like URLs with backlinks with marketing parameters in that won't be discovered in your crawl, because your own crawl won't contain those URLs. So for instance, say you had an email newsletter and you sent out a page of yours in an email that had some tracking code on, so you could see that it came from the email. The email went to 10,000 people and 50 people really loved it, and they just linked to the address you gave in the email. That would include the query string. And of course, if a URL has like a different query string, it's a different URL, Google will class that as a separate page. If it's got links, it needs to be picked up in your migration plan. That's something we're not covering again in this, so don't take this as a full migration plan. You can pick up those kind of links in Search Console, look in your analytics, whatever you use for organic pages that had visits. You can literally look at incoming links to URLs in your favorite tools. There's lots of ways to do that. Once we've got our origin.csv, we want to repeat with the staging site. So you want to essentially just run another crawl, this time on your staging site. It might be worth knowing that Screaming Frog does have things like forms authentication built in. So if your staging site is behind a username or password, it can still crawl these sites. And then one thing I like to do is, so I've crawled our staging site here, which was on testing.withcanada.dev. Once I've saved that CSV file, I will actually open it and I will find and replace our staging, in this case, subdomain and different TLD, with where it's going to be live. Because when we write our final URLs, our final redirects, we're not going to be redirecting to or from our staging site. It's going to be, in this case, the same URL. This will also help with the URL matching, and it will mean our output is pretty much ready to give developers. So remember, this is what we're aiming to achieve. And if I hadn't changed that, these two URLs would say like testing.withcanada.dev. But now, because I've done this find and replace, they're matching the original domain. I've got the script. I've set up a redirect for you. So if you go to withcanada.co.uk/redirect, this will, not ironically, redirect you to the Google Colab script that we're going to be using. I'll talk you through it in a moment, but if you're kind of nerdy, there's two main components to this script. There's All-Mini LLM, which is level 6 version 2, and FACE, which is Facebook Artificial Intelligence Similarity Search. And essentially what's going to happen is the mini LM, so this is a little NLP model from Microsoft, is going to take the data that we feed it and convert it into what are called numerical vectors, which are essentially a mathematical way of representing the meaning of the text. And the Facebook AI similarity search library, funnily enough, made by Facebook, is actually it's a few different models, but it's essentially we found really, really good way of matching these vectors. So we're essentially using mini LM to convert everything to numbers, and then FACE to compare those numbers and vectors. This script, by the way, was written by a guy called Dan Emery from Carrot, Australia. He's been working on this. I've been giving him feedback on it for probably a couple of years now, and this is kind of his latest version, and using FACE, which has massively improved the kind of accuracy that we've been getting with it. So we're going to give it a go. So hopefully in a moment you will be able to see my screen. I'm completely blind now, being on one monitor, but this is the actual script. And I've got on my desktop my origin and destination file. So if we have a look at our destination at the moment, this is our staging site. And as I said, this has still got testing.withcanada. So we're just going to quickly do what I said earlier, which is we're going to say, we'll take our testing part with canada.dev. And we just want to replace this with what the live site is going to be, which will be just with Canda. If we hit replace all of those are done. And we'll save that. So these Screaming Frog exports give us the URL, the address, status code, which we filtered to, whether the page is indexable. That doesn't really matter or not at the moment because it's a staging site. But more importantly, it gives us really important information such as the title, meta description, canonical links, word counts, basically everything we could possibly want to know about these pages. Let me save this. Cool. And if you go to that URL, you should be taken to this script. Now, this might be intimidating for some people if you've never seen it before, but you basically don't need to really know anything to run these scripts. Daniel's put some extra instructions here in case you kind of forget what you need to be doing, but it's really simple. All you need to do when you come to this script is go to runtime at the top and click run all. You'll see these scripts are actually broken down into blocks, and you've got a little play button because you can execute just one block at a time. So it would work if you clicked play, waited for that to finish, you'll get a tick, then you could move on, click that. That's useful in some scripts when you need certain things to be completed before the next subsequent step. But the way that Dan has written this script means it should work if you just do runtime and click run all. And what's going to happen is in the top right here, you'll see this is connecting. So basically, Google Colab connects you to like an instance, which is essentially a virtual machine. They give you some resources to execute the Python script. And you'll see here, as the code block is running, you'll get this kind of little loading icon, and you will even get a little green where it's up to. So this will kind of let you know everything's working. This part is the longest part. This will probably take about a minute or so. What this is doing, pip is a Python package manager. So all of the things listed here, what are called packages. So it's face that we talked about. That's the mini LM sentence transformers. Pandas is used for data manipulation. That's Jupyter widgets. Once that's run, it goes straight onto here. And this is where some people get stuck because it's got a tick, but it's not obvious what to do next. If you scroll down, it's not the most user-friendly thing. You'll see it's paused because it's waiting for you to upload the files that we made here. So it wants the origin.csv. So again, it's dead simple. We choose files, select your origin from your Screaming Frog crawl, and this should upload straight away through your browser. And then it wants the destination file, so exactly the same thing. And then now what it's going to ask us to do, if you remember all of the columns we saw on our output, these are essentially the titles of those columns. So this is the metadata that we have about these URLs. So this is down to you to select what things you want to include in your match. So if you know, for instance, I have maintained the page titles between the old and new site, you can select title 1, which is the page title element, to match between the sites. If you hold down Control, you can actually select multiple things to do the match on, which is what makes this so powerful. So many scripts that were similar to this used to use more basic matching algorithms, and they would just use something like the address. So to keep this nice and simple, I'm going to just run this script on the title, which I know I've tried to keep the same. And if I hold Control, I can select the address, which is the URL field as well. And then you click Let's Go. And essentially now it will process the similarity of all of these. You might get a few warnings like this. These aren't anything to worry about. This is Hugging Face, which essentially gives us access to some models. We're using the public free ones, so we don't need an API key. So you can ignore that. Same with this. This isn't particularly important. And what it's doing now is essentially batching off and running this Facebook similarity between the vectors we've made. And it's straight away very easy to miss. It's automatically downloaded this output.csv. So if I show you this file, we've got here our origin URL and our matched URL. And one of the things I would do always at the beginning in Excel, if you go to data and then sort, I sort by similarity score. So similarity score is essentially how similar it believes those URLs and all the other metadata you give it are. So when we've got this match of 1, it's because we've actually maintained the URL, so it's done a good job there. All the titles identical as well. So this gives you then a really good place to start looking at where you might concentrate on. So here we've got some poor matches. And so for instance, on our current live website, we've got a team page that's got Floor on it, who is a lovely person from our digital PR team, and it's matched this page on our new site to just the team page. And I know that's because we haven't actually created Floor's page yet on the new website. So it's just tried to find the closest page, which it thinks is team, but it's not a great match. I think this has happened in a few cases where we haven't finished uploading content onto the new site. So actually, this is a useful tool for us to see where we've maybe missed parts. So there's like an old job ad on the current site that isn't, of course, on the new site, but it's matched it to a very similar job. And these are the kind of manual calls that you'll need to make anyway, because the reality of site migrations is that you won't always have a exact matching URL. And that's the other great thing about this script, is that if it can't find anything, it will just give you a suggestion. Pagination is sometimes where it gets stuck a bit here. So the reason why it's matching these, maybe just we have different numbers of paginated pages between the two sites. You could probably improve this again by including something like the header 1 or the header 2 that's on the page, because my guess is that the page titles across the paginated page sets are going to be the same. So you could increase accuracy if you included the header tags as well. So I'm going to jump back into my presentation now. And just finish off with just some advanced use cases. So particularly challenging site migrations might be something like you have an origin URL like page equals 3593, like some really archaic old system, and the new destination URL you've made is much friendlier and nicer, and maybe even on your old site all the titles were the same, so you can't even match the titles. You can use Screaming Frog custom extraction. So I've put a link in here, which will give you a guide to this, because you can use Screaming Frog to actually scrape any part of your web page. So if I had a really challenging migration like this, the website's still going to be templated, and I could actually extract the main body of content in a custom field on both sites. So I could grab the content from all of my origin URLs that I have migrated to my destination URLs. And even though the title doesn't match, the URL doesn't match, I'm still going to get a brilliant kind of matching metadata by just scraping that content. You can combine that maybe if you're going to, if you've got things like meta descriptions as well. The trick to getting really good results out of this script is essentially just getting the right mix of the elements that you're using for your similarity search. My advice is always start simple. Start with the address if they're similar, with titles, with headers, and see what kind of match you get from there. And then if you're not getting the results you want, go and have a look at those pages and see why maybe your results are getting thrown off. Do both sets of pages have a kind of relative we want to migrate them to, or is, like in my pagination example, I've wanted to compare the titles, but they're actually the same on each page. So that'd be kind of my last advanced tip on that. And that's everything I think I'm going to whittle you through on using Facebook AI similarity search to speed up your site migrations. I hope you found that helpful. I will be happy to try and answer some of your questions on that. My knowledge is limited on the in-depth technical of how face works behind the scenes, because that's well above my pay grade. But this is kind of the advantage of having these tools accessible to us in a user-friendly way. I'd love it if you took time to subscribe to Core Updates. I send out tips, examples, tools like this every week. Welcome if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Mark Williams Cook. I think I'm the only Mark Williams Cook on LinkedIn, so I'm quite easy to find. And you can download this deck at withcanada.co.uk/slides.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. That was really interesting and practical. And I think that site migrations will be much smoother for us and much less stressful. So thanks a lot for sharing. And now we will cover the questions if we have any. But before that, I'm just going to remind you that we will be sharing all the useful materials, the presentation, the recording after the webinar for all who registered. So no worries about that. And now let's see what we have in chat. The first question at the very beginning of the webinar was, and I'm not sure, maybe we've already covered that, but considering the rapid evolution of AI technologies, what future developments do you foresee in AI that could further revolutionize site migration processes, especially in terms of automation?
I love a bit of crystal ball gazing. So, I mean, I'm very like maxi on AI. I don't think there's much that computers won't be able to do that humans can do, and I include things like creativity in that. The technology that we've currently got is the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. You only need to look at examples, especially around like Mid-Journey 4 or 5 years ago, could barely draw a face, and now it's indistinguishable. You can generate photos. You've got OpenAI doing Sora, which is generating 60-second HD videos now. So the speed at which we're progressing is exciting, I guess is one way to say it. I mean, in the future, I see no reason why the whole process pretty much couldn't be fully automated. I think where we're going to get to in stages is having more specialized agents help us along the way with specific tasks. So at the moment, we're at the stage now of what's generally referred to as shadow IT, which is that people are hacking together solutions with technologies to solve problems. So we've got now this solution that I think is robust and good for most cases to do this URL migration, right? But this random guy, Daniel Emery, just made this script himself. It wasn't available out there. And we all use, or many of us use Screaming Frog now, for instance. I was doing SEO before Screaming Frog existed, and people were writing their own crawlers, or there was one of the first ones to come out was called Zeno's Link Sleuth. And people were just kind of programming their own stuff to do many of the things that we take for granted now. So I think the next evolution is the tools that you're seeing people hack together will see business cases for them. They'll build them as tools that will become specific agents, and then probably will have agents which then manage part of that process, because you can score the accuracy of the output of these things against humans, and there are things that computers score higher on than humans, especially when you consider the economics in terms of time saving.
Right.
Lots.
Right. Thanks a lot for sharing. That's a bright future before us to foresee. Next one is, in cases where AI-driven redirect mapping suggests unconventional or unexpected URL mappings, how do you recommend validating these suggestions to ensure they align with SEO best practices and UX?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, actually. So if I answer that backwards, when So if we're validating redirects to make sure they align with SEO best practices and UX, firstly, I'd say sometimes you get a little bit of headbutting between SEO people and maybe someone that's more concerned with user experience when it comes to redirects in the first place. A really common example is when, for instance, an e-commerce store has a popular product and that product is discontinued and it will no longer exist, and there might be a similar product, and the SEO person wants the similar product to rank for what the old product did. So they're pushing very hard. We should 301 redirect that URL to the other product so it ranks. This is SEO best practice. But then someone could equally come along from a user experience point of view and say, well, if someone's looking for this specific model, surely the most user-friendly thing we can do that would give them the best experience would be to tell them that that product is discontinued now, and to then just provide them a link to the new product, because it might confuse them if you're looking for, whatever product model B and you just get redirected to model C, and you might be like, hang on, this isn't the one I wanted. I'll try and find that one. So firstly, I would say that you will always have an issue when there isn't an objectively correct answer. So you can't expect a machine to make those decisions and then for everyone to say they are correct if humans themselves cannot decide what is the correct thing to do. So in answering it from a technical perspective, in terms of if it suggests unconventional or unexpected URL mappings, the output from those scripts are deterministic. They are based on trying to match on the fields that we've given. So while it might produce unexpected results, if you do what I said at the end and kind of go back and look at the things in those examples you're asking it to match, my opinion would be, while they might be unexpected, they're certainly not unexplainable. And normally it's because the operator has overlooked something. And in those cases, you can always batch and say, okay, well, that worked really well for all of these product pages, but because of the way we've set up these categories, this matching doesn't work. So I would just break your CSV up into 2 different CSVs and process the redirects maybe with different selections of which data you're looking at. And again, I'd say the amount of unconventional, unexpected mappings that I've seen with this latest version using FACE, I think that's how you pronounce it, Facebook AI Similarity Search, has been a lot lower than previous models which just used kind of vector space distance in a very linear way, and when they just relied on one type of meta information.
Awesome.
Hopefully
Thanks
that
a lot.
answers your question.
Yeah, I think that was pretty in depth. So moving forward to the next one, would you use the same process for the images? I think that's supposed to mean the same process as you described in the presentation.
I'm trying to avoid the classic "it depends" answer. Images tend to be complicated because of a couple of reasons. So if you're in a world where you've got a nice simple site and you're serving your own images and they're just getting taken across, you should be able to nice and easily use this process on URLs. If you are going to migrate the images to new URLs, and for instance, your CMS might rename them, it's possible to get a hash of the image, which you could potentially use as a nice and easy match, which would be a very good way to do it. The issue that I would foresee is that in a lot of modern stacks, you'll have like a CDN edge type system that might make multiple copies of images. It might compress it, and it might want to serve different formats. It might change the hash. So it can be used, yes, but you just need to really understand the technology of how you're doing your image hosting, where they're hosting, and what control you've got there. And again, what is the similarity thing you're going to be matching? Images it's a really good question, because they're one of the things I think that get overlooked the most in migrations. And when you actually look in Search Console, especially e-com sites will sometimes generate a lot of traffic through image search, because shopping is like a visual thing. People search for a product and they scroll through images, click on one, and then take them to the URL. But yes, there's probably a few ways to do that. It's a really good question, Brenda. I haven't used Face yet for image redirects, because we've only had this script now like 3-4 months maybe, and I haven't had to do images with it yet, because I've been lucky so far.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. And the all favorite question, the next one, is about costs. Of course, what are the typical costs for using the AI APIs with the script, and what are some factors that can affect the cost?
So the models in the script don't incur any charges. So go for it. Yeah, it's a pre-built, pre-cooked model. So it uses the face model. There's a couple of different face models. There's a CPU and GPU one. I don't know if there's a TPU one. So Google Colab can give you CPU resources, GPU resources, and I think TPU resources for their Tensor stuff. And so I used to build my own image generation models on Google Colab, and for that I was paying for GPU priority and hours time. Because Face this version uses CPU, and I don't think the model's that intensive. I don't believe, the biggest I've done on Face is about 10,000-20,000 URLs so far. But if you did 1 million URLs, I just think because we're using CPU, it's quite efficient, the model. So I don't think you're even going to need to pay for Google Colab. Be interested if anyone knows more about that. But as far as I understand, I don't think you're going to get charged. Well, you certainly won't get charged without Google letting you know, but I don't think it will reach the point where you would need to pay Colab for resources to run that script.
Thank you very much. Great answer. And the next question is actually has two parts. First, any chance to create mapping based on site content, like, for example, product description? And would the script work the same with data outside of SF?
Yes. So that's kind of what I mentioned at the end, which is you can use the Screaming Frog custom extractions. So if you've got product descriptions, they're probably marked up in a specific way. You can normally right click in Chrome, select the thing you want to use as your text data in your template, and you can do copy XPath, which is essentially kind of the way to find that type of content in the HTML. And you can use XPath in Screaming Frog to get that part of content from the site. So if you had, as I said at the end there, if nothing else matched but product descriptions, you could potentially do that. You just need to keep the sheet formatted the same as the kind of Screaming Frog one. So the scripts, if you look at it, is just taking the column titles. So yeah, that should be fine to do with data outside of Screaming Frog as well. My caveat is I haven't had to do that myself yet, but looking at the script, I can't see why that wouldn't work. Or you could just modify the script if you needed to do that, I guess. So there's definitely a way, and I'm 99% sure that would just work out of the box doing that.
Nice. Let's hope so. Then another question is about CMS. Does it matter in migration? And are there any special precautions for Drupal?
Wow, it's been many years since I've used a Drupal website. It's probably been 10 years since I've worked in a Drupal site. The CMS, Google doesn't care what CMS you use, right? So in that regard, the CMS doesn't matter in migration. What matters in migration is how you're presenting content. Some CMSs, won't render any content unless JavaScript is enabled, which can cause you SEO problems. Some CMS systems that are no code tend to be very, very slow. So it's performance, which could potentially affect user experience, potentially affect rankings. So you need to be aware of those impacts of a CMS on your migration. All CMS systems will have their own foibles, which are their own things that normally need fixing. So for instance, like classic WordPress, the first thing you do is get a plugin, or you make sure tag pages aren't indexable. If you're using Shopify, you always have to edit the liquid template to make sure it's not creating a separate URL every time a product's in more than one category. They've all these CMS systems normally have something that lets them down with SEO that needs fixing. I'm sure there's probably lists online about Drupal specifically. I couldn't tell you anything. As I said, I haven't had to use Drupal in a very, very, very long time. I remember seeing lots of node URLs, and it was very painful when I did work with it. But maybe it's a lot better now. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a long time since I heard about it, but we see that it's still used. Okay, next one is it necessary to make a copy of your Colab script?
Yeah, so I probably should have mentioned that actually in Google Colab, in the file menu at the top, there's an option that's make a copy. And what that will do is just make a local copy for you on your Google Drive that you can kind of fully edit yourself. That's a good idea, just to do that so you're not reliant on anyone else keeping it on Google Drive. The only thing I would say is just check back if the script gets updated ever, because you'll just have your version then. So Daniel sometimes updates his script, so I go and just check, or he tells me and we will chat when he updates it. But yeah, it's always a good idea if you're using Google Colab script, just to go file, make a copy. So thanks, Alex, for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. And next one is, do we have an accuracy in this process in real-world site migration scenarios? If you use this in your work, are you satisfied with the results you have already?
Yes. So firstly, if I had not used it on real work, and if I wasn't satisfied with the results, I wouldn't be presenting it on this webinar, as that would be an awful thing to do. So like Jack was on this chat at the beginning. I actually worked with Jack. Jack has used this script on a live site. Brendan here has used it on a light side migration. I'm using it on, I've used it on 2 clients already and on our own site. It saved hours and hours and hours of time. I've used it on big sites as well. I've been really happy with it. We've always had some kind of, well, always, it's exaggeration, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've always had some kind of script to help us with this task, because it's such a time-consuming task. And I'm very much of the belief that if you're doing a repetitive task on a computer, you're using the computer wrong. So wherever you can automate things, I do try. So we've always been using a script like this. This one is the best that we've used, which is why I'm sharing it. We've had the good thing is you get that similarity score, so you can very quickly hone down on what needs human validation. If you're scoring, above 0.95, the most you need to do normally is just kind of spot check the URLs in the list. But yeah, absolutely, I'm really happy with it. That's why I'm sharing it, so I can help other people with their jobs and do things a bit faster. And then you can spend more time arguing with developers and stakeholders about SEO instead of working on big spreadsheets of URLs.
And we are grateful and relying on your experience. So I think that it's a bulletproof thing. Next one is a bit philosophical to me. Do you think that SEO is the first field of marketing that will be fully automated with SEO?
No. So interestingly, right, I thought maybe 10 years ago, I thought that, so I did a lot of I've always done a lot of technical SEO, because I've always been interested in development. And 10 years ago, when I halfway through my SEO career, I was like, I think there's probably going to be less technical SEO in the future, because what technical SEO is essentially you're making up for the technical shortcomings of the search engine. So the search engine, without your help, can't maybe crawl this website. It maybe can't understand this thing as easily as a human can. We have things like hreflang tags and canonical tags, and we had previous rel next to help label things for search engines. We've got structured data now to make the unstructured web easier for them. And I thought, well, search engines are just going to get better. The web's going to stay roughly the same, so there won't be much technical SEO. 10 years later, where we are now, I'm doing more technical SEO than I've ever done before, because the web has turned out to be, more complicated itself. The web, we've got so much JavaScript going on everywhere. We're trying to change the experiences we're having on the web that it's constantly providing new challenges to search engines. JavaScript is kind of the classic one in that crawling, indexing, basic HTML is very quick, easy, and cheap for search engines to do. Rendering JavaScript, CSS, things like that is very expensive and time consuming. I think SEO will completely change over the next 5 or 10 years. Certainly, we've seen loads of data about from Gartner, who make questionable predictions, but saying people are going to use, answer engines more like ChatGPT. I think we'll have more solved area spaces like that where we won't get as much search traffic. But I don't think we're ever going to have SEO on autopilot, because SEO is about getting more traffic to your site from organic search. And the main levers still are, you do your technical SEO, you make great content, but the creativity of making something really special, getting people to talk about it, to link to it, is still what search engines have have their crutch on. All those documents that came out in the Department of Justice trial with Google show that they've been using click data, they've been using user data. They literally said in their presentation, we don't understand documents, we fake it, and we look stupid when we get it wrong, is what Google said in an internal presentation, because they're looking at how users interact with sites. And I think we've got a long while to go before all of that stuff can be automated and be better than what humans can surprise us with.
Great answer, and I think that's a great question to wrap up our presentation today. We do not have any more questions, just kudos to Mark and telling you how great was the presentations and the answers. So thanks a lot again, Mark, for joining us today and sharing these tips and tricks and everything practical in terms of migration. Before we wrap up, I would like to say a few words for the visitors of webinar today. We have an expanded free trial. That's a great opportunity for you to get more familiar with SEO ranking, try different tools in our package like competitive research, website audit, keyword rank tracker, anything. So you can access this free trial by the QR code you see or by the link that will be shared in chat. Don't miss out this opportunity. And also speaking about opportunities, we are always about knowledge sharing. So we prepare great courses for you as part of our academy. You can see SEO basics course or content SEO course if you are more work more with content. Also for agencies. Will definitely benefit from our How to Promote Your Agency course. And you can always get to know more about SEO ranking in action in our series of tool workshops. So everything in our academy is free for our users, and you can always benefit from a bit more knowledge that you can get here. And I want to remind you that SEO ranking is not only the great product, but a great community behind it. We are always welcoming you to join us, test new tools before they are even released online, ask different questions, discuss industry trends. It's interesting here, and we are always welcome like-minded people to join. So the QR code is here, and also the links will be shared. And last but not least, our Do Follow podcast. If you have not subscribed yet, please do that, because we are always sharing great SEO insights with industry leaders, and you will always be on top of the news that are important. So subscribe now and do follow us. And speaking about followership, we also have placed several links to our social media. So whatever you like, you can join us and stay connected. Stay tuned for our next events. We always have something interesting for you. Thanks again. And we are going to wrap up. I'm sure that you loved this webinar today, because it was really amazing. So thanks a lot, Mark, and thanks to all our visitors. I hope your migration with AI will be smooth from now. And stay tuned for the next events. Have a great rest of the week.